People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. That idea applies just as much to leadership as it does to business. It's not about barking orders, it's about giving them a reason to believe.
Because when people believe in the why, you don't have to manage them. They kind of tend to manage themselves. What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the Fitz Franson Show. I'm Fitz.
And I'm Franson.
This is a show where we talk about leadership, business, growth, and what it actually takes to build something that lasts.
Without lying to yourself along the way.
That's the part that really matters. Today, we're going to dive into a topic that's foundational to everything we discuss here, leadership, but not just in the way you might think. We're going to crack the code on what it really means to lead in today's world.
That's right. The reason this matters so much is because most of us don't choose how we lead. We default. We're going to be talking about leadership styles here. So understanding your own personality and strengths and how to match those to the needs of your team. Because here's the thing. Most of us lead based on how we've been led or based on our own comfort zone. We don't always lead in the way our people need us to.
Exactly. And that gap between how we lead and how our people need to be led, that's unfortunately where the friction lives. That gap's what we want to be able to close today. So we're going to give you a framework to understand your own leadership style and, more importantly, how to adapt it. We'll be pulling in wisdom from some of the greats, Simon Sinek, Jocko Willink, and even Winston Churchill.
Yeah. Definitely greats for sure. To be clear, this isn't just theory. This isn't a philosophy episode, though I love that. This is an application episode. By the end of this episode, you'll have a new lens to look through, hopefully, a new way to think about how you show up as a leader, whether that's for a team of one or even team of thousands.
Here's a recurring theme you'll hear us come back to today. Leadership is a verb. It's not a title. It's about action. It's about what you do, and it's not really about what you're called. So let's start with the fundamentals, Jay. What actually makes a good leader? We're here and we hear all of these buzzwords rather thrown around about what does it really boil down to? Through all the research and our own experience, a few core qualities always rise to the top. If I were going to list them, it probably goes something like this: integrity, self-awareness, courage, empathy, and resilience.
Yeah, what a great list, Fitz. And I think a great place to start is even, with Simon Sinek's concept of start with why. Good book, by the way, if you haven't read it. He famously said, people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. That idea applies just as much to leadership as it does to business. It's not about barking orders, it's about inspiring people with a sense of purpose. It's about giving them a reason to believe.
Yeah, I love that, because when people believe in the why, you don't have to manage them that much, really. They kind of tend to manage themselves. It reminds me of a leader that I had earlier in my career. He wasn't really the most charismatic guy, but he had this really incredible ability to connect everything that we did back to the larger mission. He had this kind of subtle way of making it feel like your work really, truly mattered, like you were part of something bigger than yourself almost. Really what he was doing was making sure that you knew how much you mattered. That's a lesson I think that has truly just stuck with me, and hopefully I pass along to my people.
That's a powerful example, because inspiration is what carries people through the hard seasons. It's that impact, that belief that fuels resilience. There's a quote from Winston Churchill that captures this perfectly. He said, "Success is not final, failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts." A great leader instills that courage in their team.
Churchill's one of my favorites. Jay, I think what's the old phrase, at a certain age, all middle-aged men have to get into either smoking meat or, World War II history or whatever it is.
That's
I think
right.
I did both at the same time,
Yep.
but he's one of my favorites for sure. He's a guy who led a nation through its darkest hour. If you ever get a chance to do the bunker tours, I highly recommend. But he led that country through that really terrible time, but he did it without pretending everything was fine. He was honest about the challenges, but also at the same time relentless about the vision of victory. That's really true authenticity, that steadiness. That is really, I think, the definition of leadership.
Yeah, and for sure people can feel that. They can also feel the opposite. If you're not genuine, if you don't actually believe what you're saying, your team knows. They may comply, but they won't follow you in any real meaningful way.
So true. So true. So if we zoom out for a second and summarize this, a good leader has integrity. They are absolutely self-aware. They have courage. They show empathy. They are resilient. But maybe most importantly, they have a clear why that inspires others to follow them. And here's where I think it gets interesting, because that why and that courage can show up very differently depending on the leader and the situation. I think it's critical, like I said, for us to understand having that self-awareness, right? So, Franson, this brings up the thing that we wanted to talk about today is the different styles of leadership. There's no one size fits all approach. And we've seen a lot of great different leaders throughout history. The best leaders, I think, know how to adapt. So let's
Yeah.
take a little bit of time here and break down the six maybe most common styles of leadership.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great idea, Fitz. So we'll move through these pretty quickly. The goal here is awareness, not labeling yourself forever. It's definitely kind of that finding that starting point. So the first one that we wanted to quickly touch on is what's called a transformational leader. These would be the leaders that inspire and motivate their teams to a higher level of performance. Think of figures like Martin Luther King Jr. or Mahatma Gandhi. They create a vision and then empower their followers to execute it. They're all about changing the game.
Yeah, MLK is a perfect example of that. His I Have a Dream speech wasn't just words, it was a vision that moved millions of people, obviously. He didn't just tell people what to do, he painted a very vivid picture of a better future and inspired them to work towards it. That's transformational leadership at its finest.
Yeah, absolutely. So then next one we want to touch on is called servant leadership. Pretty common term. Most of you have probably heard it. This is the leader who puts the needs of their team first. They'll focus on growth and well-being of their people and the communities to which they belong. So Nelson Mandela is a prime example of a servant leader, a powerful and humble approach.
Yeah, I think Mandela roughly spent about 30 years or so in prison, I think it was.
Yeah,
And when he came out, I don't know that I could have done this, but he did not seek revenge. He sought reconciliation. He put the needs of his country and his people above his own. That
yeah.
I think is the absolute kind of pinnacle of the servant leadership act. That's the ultimate act of that for sure. It's about serving a greater cause above your own.
Next, authoritative leader. This isn't authoritarian, which is dictatorial. An authoritative leader is a visionary who sets a clear direction and says, hey, follow me. They mobilize people toward a vision. They're confident and clear. This can be incredibly effective, especially in times of uncertainty.
Yeah, a good example here would be Steve Jobs. He had a really clear vision of Apple and was, to say the least, relentless in pursuing it. Now,
Mhm.
by many accounts, he may not have been the easiest person to work with or for, but he absolutely inspired some incredible innovation. And because people, I think, really just bought into his vision, it is definitely a true example of authoritative leadership for sure.
We can definitely see those people leading massive organizations. They just know where they're going. They say, come with or not, but I'm
Uh-huh.
going this direction. If you're into biographies, Jobs is a great biography to
Yeah.
throw in your headphones and listen to. So that brings us to a style that's almost the opposite end of the spectrum in terms of decision making, the participative or democratic leader. This leader involves the team in the decision making process. They're going to work towards building consensus and collaboration. This style is great for getting buy in, for making complex decisions where multiple perspectives are valuable.
I think it's important to note on this one, Franson, this one is really good if you're dealing with like knowledge workers, people who are experts in their field.
Yeah.
You really don't want to dictate to those people. You want to tap into their expertise. You want to make them feel ownership in the program or the outcome that you're striving for.
That- That's really true. And not every role or every moment calls for that level of collaboration. That's where the transactional leader comes in. This is more of a give and take approach, clear expectations, clear rewards. And honestly, this style is incredibly effective for keeping day to day operations running smoothly.
Yeah, it's a classic, probably the more classic management model.
Yeah.
You do this, you get that set up. It works, I think, especially for maybe that more routine task or performance based type roles. If that's all you do, I think it becomes a little limiting at times. People need more than just a paycheck to feel truly engaged most times.
Yeah, that's the truth. There's a certain income potential that you go from you're in it for the paycheck to paycheck, just surviving. It's that extrinsic motivation versus intrinsic. And a lot of people in the intellectual industries, the pay is there. So it isn't about the paycheck. But anyway, so the final model that we want to talk about is the delegator or the laissez faire leader. And this is more of a hands off approach that works best with highly skilled, motivated teams.
If we're looking at all of them, and I was going to put myself in one of those categories, Francis, I think I would naturally lean towards more of like probably that authoritative and transformational style.
Yeah.
I tend to like to maybe paint a vision and get people fired up. I'm one for a pump up speech myself.
Mhm.
go chase something down. How about yourself?
I'm more in the collaborative, servant oriented situation. It's my personality, or even the laissez faire. I really love the idea of, hey, this is how you succeed. Go do it. I want to hear from the team. I prefer to see my role as clearing the path for my team to do their best work. But this is the key point here, Fitz. None of these are really right or wrong. The real skill is knowing yourself and knowing how to adapt.
Exactly. That's important. That self awareness is the foundation, I think, of great leadership. You can't adapt, though, if you don't know your own starting point. This is where understanding your personality comes in. And again, it's not about putting yourself in a box, but more about understanding your natural tendencies.
Yeah, this is where the works of people like Daniel Goleman come into effect, and he's done a lot of work on emotional intelligence. A lot of people like to talk about IQ, but he argues that emotional intelligence, or EQ, is a far better predictor of leadership success than IQ. It isn't about just being smart, it's about being smart with people. And the cornerstone of EQ is self awareness.
I do a lot of trainings with sales teams and stuff on emotional intelligence. It's a really critical thing to understand. Goldman does a great job breaking down EQ into 5 components: self awareness, self regulation, motivation, empathy, and social skills. And it all starts with that self awareness, like we're talking about. You have to understand your own emotions, your triggers, your strengths, and your weaknesses before you can effectively lead others.
Yeah, that's so true. And you see this all the time, to be honest. Brilliant people who are terrible leaders because they have no idea how they come across to others. They can't read a room, they can't connect with their team. They lack that self awareness that we're talking about.
The good news, though, is that there are tools that can help with this, help you identify these things. There are things out there like the DISC assessment, for example, which helps you
Yeah.
understand if you're dominant, influential, steady, or conscientious. Or I know there's one that you like, which is the Myers Briggs, for example.
Mhm.
But again, these aren't meant to be definitive labels, but they can give you a language to understand your own maybe patterns, or better yet, the patterns of others.
Yeah, good example. If you know you're a high D on the disc, you tend to be direct, results oriented, and maybe even a little impatient. Kind of sounds like somebody I know. That's valuable information. It helps you understand why you might clash with someone who's a high S, who values stability and a slower pace.
You think I'm impatient?
No.
We'll talk about that later. No worries.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, another for the listeners, another maybe powerful framework is the strengths-based leadership from Gallup. I know you like that one too, Jay. I think
Yeah.
you and I have done those together.
Yeah.
The idea is simple. It's, I guess, wrapped around stop trying to be good at everything. Instead, figure out what you're naturally good at, and then lean into those strengths. And
Yeah.
just as importantly, I think with that though is the concept is surround yourself with people who are strong in the areas you're weak.
Yeah, and this is huge and powerful media and Fitz, you've seen it too in some of the relationships and businesses that you've been a part of. A lot of businesses start where the owner is really supposed to be good at everything. They wear all the hats. The owner is supposed to know the business finance as well as the marketing and sales. So there is a certain point in your business trajectory where you do need to put effort into doing all the things. But what we're talking about here is increasing in self-awareness so that as your business grows, you are able to strategically find people to fill in those weaker spots for you. So research shows that you'll get a much better return on investment by doubling down on your strengths and building that team that complements you.
100%. Find a way to become the dumbest person in the room, right? Is
Yep.
really the goal there. So
Yep.
I think the takeaways here is know yourself, understand your personality, your EQ, your strengths, and your weaknesses. That self awareness is really a critical foundation upon which you can build your leadership skills.
And speaking of building those skills, let's talk about a leader who has a very clear and powerful philosophy. That is Jocko Willink.
Mm.
He's a former Navy SEAL commander, and his concept of extreme ownership, and it's a great book, is a game changer for a lot of leaders. The core idea is very simple, but it's also not easy. He says there's no one else to blame. You must own your problems along with solutions.
Yeah, it's like a radical level of accountability. And truthfully, I kind of love that type of concept.
Yeah.
It means that as a leader, you are responsible for everything in your world. It's not
Yeah.
just the things that necessarily you directly control, but everything that impacts your mission. If your team fails, then you failed. If the project goes sideways, you got to own it. It's about
Yeah.
taking ownership of the failures, the mistakes, all of it, everything in between.
Yeah. And from that foundation, he builds out what he calls the four laws of combat, which are directly applicable to business. So the first is cover and move. It's all about teamwork and mutual support. No one wins alone. You have to have each other's backs.
The second is simple. Basically, keep it simple, stupid. Don't
Yep.
overcomplicate things. Your plans and communication, they got to all be clear and concise. It kind of goes without saying, if your team doesn't understand the plan, then they can't execute it, nor could you expect them to. Complexity is
Yeah.
truly the enemy of execution.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good. And the third is prioritize and execute. In any chaotic situation, you have to identify the highest priority task and then execute on it. You can't do everything at once. Another analogy that I use, I don't remember where it came from, maybe EOS, is big rocks first, right? You have a jar, put those big rocks in. You have to
Mhm.
focus on your resources, on what matters most right now.
Yeah, it was a good analogy with the rocks for sure. The fourth, the last one there for him is, I think is really important. Decentralized command. You have to empower your team to be able to make decisions, simply because you can't be everywhere at once, right? So you have to trust your people to lead in their own areas of expertise and responsibility.
Yeah, that's the dichotomy of leadership he talks about in his follow up book. A leader must be confident but not arrogant, humble but not passive. You have to be able to lead, but also be willing to follow. It's a constant balancing act. And it all comes back to that core idea of discipline. As Jocko says, discipline equals freedom.
That's a good one. I love that phrase. It kind of sounds counterintuitive, but it's true. When you have discipline in your routines and your process and your standards, it actually in a way creates freedom, creates more freedom. You're not constantly reacting to that chaos that we encounter on a daily basis. You're operating from more of a position of control.
Yeah.
So the balancing act is really kind of the art of leadership, in at least my humble opinion. I
Mhm.
think it leads us perfectly into the next concept we wanted to talk about today, which is situational leadership. This framework developed by, I think it was Hersey and Blanchard, is built on a really powerful idea. The most inconsistent thing a leader can do is treat everybody the same.
Yeah, man. And this is so crucial. Your leadership style shouldn't really be about you. A lot of leaders mistakenly think that this is who I am and you can take me or leave me, but it should ultimately actually be about what your team needs. Situational leadership gives you a model for diagnosing the needs of your people and then adapting your style to meet them. And this breaks down into four styles based on the follower's readiness.
So, talk about the first one here. The first is telling. This is for team members who are maybe new or unsure. They might be very enthusiastic, but they lack the skills or the experience. In this case, you provide a clear, specific set of directions. And you're not really being a micromanager, so to say. You're providing the structure that they truly need to be successful or succeed in the role you've given them.
Next one is selling or coaching. Big fan of this one. This is for people who are eager and motivated, but they still lack skills. Love hiring people that are teachable. So you're still providing direction, but you're also explaining that why that we talked about and getting them brought into this vision. And you're coaching them up. You're building their competence and their confidence.
So the next one on the list here is participating and or like supporting. This is for team members who are capable, but maybe they're lacking confidence or motivation, something along those lines. They can
Mhm.
do the job, but something, whatever it might be, is holding them back. You're not giving them a lot of direction. You're collaborating with them, encouraging them, patting them on the back, and helping them find their own way.
And then finally, there's the delegating. This is for your high performers who are both skilled and motivated. You empower them, you trust them, you then get out of their way. Your role is to provide resources and support, not to manage their every move.
The real skill here, Jay, is being able to accurately assess where your people are at on any given task. And it's important to note that it's task specific. Someone
Yeah.
might be a high performer on one task, but true newbie beginner on another. So you got to really
Mhm.
pay close attention to that. From one task to the next, it can totally change for that person. And you have to be able to adapt accordingly.
And it really is about leveraging questions. So ask yourself, what does this person need from me right now to be successful? And then Have the flexibility to provide it. That's what separates good leaders from great ones. So, we've covered a lot of ground today, Fitz. Let's bring it all together with some actionable takeaways. If you're listening to this, here are 3 questions you should be asking yourself this week.
Yeah, good thought. So, first one for you. What is my natural leadership style? Be honest with yourself. Are you a delegator or a participator in an authoritative leader? Knowing your
Mhm.
default is really the first step to kind of building upon it.
Yeah. So, second one is, what does my team or my audience need from me right now? Look at the situation, look at the readiness of your people and their capacity, and what do they need to be successful?
The third and last one here, maybe the most important question you can ask. Am I willing to adapt and meet that need? It's a tough one. And you got to be honest with
Yeah.
yourself here. This is where that real growth happens. It's about closing that gap between who you are and who your team needs you to be.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, leadership, it's a verb, not a title. It's not about the position you hold, it's about the actions you take. It's about showing up for your people every single day.
And remember, you don't have to be perfect. Leadership is a journey, it's not a destination, probably on a pillow somewhere on your couch, right? Uh,
That's right.
but the goal is really truly about getting a little bit better every single day to be more self-aware, more adaptable, more effective.
Yeah. Fitz, we've been talking about growth a lot lately, and I like the phrase that what got you here won't get you there. What got you into a small business where you're wearing all the hats won't get you into that next level of growth. So, anyway, that's the challenge for this week. Identify one person on your team or one situation you're facing. Consciously adapt your leadership approach. Change your language, change your style. See what happens. We'd love to hear about it.
Absolutely. Yeah. We're going to continue these conversations maybe next week and dive maybe a little deeper into some different leadership challenges that are out there. So make sure you subscribe so you don't miss it.
Yeah. Thanks for tuning in to the Fitz and Franson Show. If you got value from this episode, do us a favor and share it with another leader who wants to hear it, who needs to hear it. Ring the bell, like and subscribe, and let us know what you think.
If you didn't get value out of it, keep it to yourself as always.
That's right. We
Yeah.
don't want to hear about
That's it.
it.
Jay, always a pleasure, sir.
Yeah, absolutely. Likewise. We'll see you guys next time on the Fitz and Franson Show.
Happy hunting, everybody.